All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello all, Happy New Year. If you have not yet been here, please accept our New Year's greetings. It will be a great year. It's a troubling year ahead in many ways, but we are here for you with the serious, the light, the exciting. Niners are doing well for Niners fans, and for those joining from Southern California, the Rams are in, I think. And we've got the commission on the case. Albert is here, Commissioner. It is the case that the Rams are also doing well, right?
Albert, thank you.
Yeah, they're second in the division, and they both the LA teams they got Shohei and the other Japanese guy too. So they got lots to look forward to down there.
Yeah. Can you hear Albert? Okay, Kim?
Yeah, I can hear him.
All right. Kim is here, of
Kim,
course.
how are you?
And Kim of the Nikki Maduro show. She also does the After Party Live show. So she is she's a working news person, and she's watching news events today. We have a lot to get to. David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, will be here, and we'll talk about believe it or not, among other things, the list. How does a list like that from Jeffrey Epstein get public? It does, and it is, and there are a couple of wrinkles. I'll get to it immediately, and then we'll talk about sort of the legal machinations associated with that list and the Epstein case with David Katz. I also want to get into a lot of Trump stuff with David Katz because Trump is doing some things that are quite effective in terms of his appeal. And his appeal on the Colorado case and on the main case associated with removing the Trump name from the ballot because of his connection to insurrection. And the notion is that because of these appeals, there really may be a constitutional crisis in this country. So those questions will bump to the second hour with David Katz, who will be along. Stories from the sky. I have a revelation or two associated with that Coast Guard plane that burst into flames, part of the relief effort with the Japan earthquake. There in Law and Disorder is the judge that was attacked. We'll have that video, and I have some thoughts on that. And I have an angry, long comment. You can read it publicly. Yeah, I mean, it is an angry comment by a viewer.
What?
I know. This is clearly someone from San Francisco. You know, this station, KGO, where we live, for a long time we lived at KGO, and then KGO went away, legendary talk radio station, and we moved this show, and other shows like it also migrated to YouTube. That's where we are now on this platform. We're also on most major podcast platforms. But anyway, somebody who is clearly a regular listener of the old station and a legacy listener, has listened for a long time in the Bay Area, has also come here on some level. I can tell by the comment. And I'll share the comment with you. I can't decide, Albert, whether I should do it now or do you want to wait?
I think it'd be a great way to start the show, Mark.
All right, let's start with the negativity, the bilious rage of a listener viewer.
The Mark Thompson Show.
You know, if there's one thing I love, it's angry comments. I love them.
I've received a lot of positive letters.
This is the comment that you can read along with me. It's long. Look, when these comments come on YouTube, they come in right on my phone. Look at that. Look how long this comment is.
Oh, that's a big one.
It's a big, angry blast. And I love it.
What did you do?
Exactly. That's what I said. I'm going to take my credibility glasses off
I mean, that's a long letter. You must have really inspired some anger.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Yeah.
You know, you don't get long positive letters like this. You don't get long positive comments. Let me tell you all the things I love about your show. You don't get it.
No.
You get long, angry screeds. And here we go. This is about...
Screed is a dingable word. Definitely.
Screed is dingable, you're right. The response clearly is in relation to, did yesterday I yell at you, Albert, or something? Or yelled at Kim or something? What happened, Albert, yesterday?
Was there all of us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just a little bit of yelling, Mark. I'm happy to be here still.
Why are you yelling?
I'd be willing to bet my lunch that there's alcohol involved.
No, it was, anyway. This comes from PT. The arrogant boss shtick rubs me the wrong way. Every time I hear it. Wow. Every time. It doesn't work ever.
What?
Yeah. I'm troubled by that. You think, once in a while it works. Nope. 2 reasons. : 1, many bosses out there are such jerks. And 2, I think much of the attitude you'd have us believe is all in jest, is exactly what you actually feel. I also noticed that you don't pull this crap on Tony much. Oh,
that's not true.
of course it's not true. None of this is true.
He's an equal opportunity offender. I'm just saying.
My God. I just, the prior day, did a whole thing about how Tony is anti-energy. Remember that whole thing I did?
Yes, I remember.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I do.
Anyway, I also noticed that you don't pull this crap on Tony much, probably because to you, he's more of an equal and less of a subservient male. Oh, my God. So when somebody says, well, never mind, we'll keep going. I think you also recognize how much you need Tony because much of what he does, you would be unable to do for yourself. I'm unable to do anything for myself, so that would go with anybody on the show. Well, I suggest that in the future, before you denigrate Kim and Albert, you consider how much you also need them if you intend to maintain your current production standards.
Why are you yelling?
They, too, deserve the decorum and respect that you show Tony.
Why are you yelling?
Albert with the applause. They get the decorum and respect that I show Tony. By publicly impugning Kim and Albert. Impugning would be a ding word. Do I have the ding on this bank? I think, yeah, there you go. By publicly impugning Kim and Albert, you are doing damage to their reputation, something that could be legally actionable. Wow.
Oh, I'm going to sue.
Yes.
Let me put that in my back pocket.
Employees can even be considered to be sexual harassment. Oh.
What?
Or ethnic and social class berating, similar to making bigoted slurs against ethnically diverse employees. Sure, you could.
Wild idea, but it just might work.
Hey, I don't mean to joke. That'd be serious.
Yeah.
Wow. If a former employee were to take you to court, it might be decided that you don't have a leg to stand on, Mark. If nothing else, such a lawsuit could cost you a lot of money. You should take a page from top successful comedians. It's okay to kick up or to self-deprecate. Self-deprecate. Deprecate, I will. Yeah, it's an odd, but I understand. Okay. It can't be, and then but it's worse to kick down as this tends to turn people against you.
Sure.
It can't be the only one. Again, I'm sorry, this is long, but I'll try to skip along. I can't be the only one that feels this way. Many of us have suffered working for bosses who are jerks, and unlike what your privilege and class have allowed you, many of us cannot afford to take the risk of trying to take our services to another employer in protest. It sounds like this person has some baggage.
Maybe. I don't know.
Then there's this. This is a weird thing. P.S. Unfortunately, few are going to write you to say all this. Well, I certainly hope that's true. Most that you rub the wrong way are just going to leave your channel and listen to other podcasts. P.S. I like your show, but... one of these things is not like the other. The I like your show.
What?
Yeah. I like your show, but I think it's overproduced and structured too rigidly. Many of the recurring segments, like Fabulous Florida, as it's called here in the note, are just too much time-wasting fluff to me.
Oh.
Albert, that's your segment.
Oh my gosh.
I know. You've been insulted, whether this person realizes it or not.
Those are kind of fighting words.
I'd rather have more interviews regarding current events. Then this person goes, I'd like to see you get Peter B. Collins as a guest.
What? Okay.
Oh, he denigrates my segment, and then he's trying to take my job.
Yeah, Peter B. Collins. Maybe
Yeah,
Peter B. Collins should be. We should give all of Fridays to Peter B. Collins.
What?
He be available. Collins be informed. Blah 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 blah. And then somebody writes. So it's I sent Kim info before about how you might contact Peter B. Collins. Is that right, Kim? Did you receive something from this person?
It's likely.
So Kim, whoever you are, Kim apparently just seems like she kind of circular filed your.
Kim, how are you? My bad. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying.
There are some things where I know what the response is going to be, and so I don't present it to you because I already know ahead of time that's going to be a no.
Oh, okay. So it's on me.
Yes, it's kind of on you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Then somebody said, I'm kind of thinking you're new to the show. There's a lot of friendly banter going daily, and it's not a hostile work environment.
No.
I would suggest giving the show a second chance. And if it's not your cup of tea, find something that fits your needs. This person, Rush6414, responded so, what would you say, cool-headedly, maybe?
Yeah, calmly.
Personally, I find the show amusing and informative and full of facts.
Yeah.
YouTube is lucky to have the Mark Thompson show on it. I wish I could. I'm going to give Rush6414 the rod of equity and mercy before the end of the show. Please remind me. And then this person who wrote the original insulting email, the I like your show but email, says, Rush, I've been here since day one. To me, Mark's shtick gets old when it comes to kicking down on his underlings, and that kind of goes on about that. Sometimes when I hear Mark do this, I have to kick back. And the first show of the new year is what triggered today's outcry. And then the person goes on, and this person with multiple, it's very, I mean, they're paragraph after paragraph. That's the next one.
Why are you yelling?
You get the idea. There's
we get the point.
Very unhappy is PTIE2XJ. And PT, first, I'm very sorry you're not happy with the product. It wounds me, and I'm putting my credibility glasses on as I address you. The structured format to which you've referred and you've mentioned in your criticism is something that we try to follow because we like a pace to the show. When we go unstructured, as you're aware, listener Lori gets up my ass, okay? So I try to please as many people as I can. When the show gets too heavy, I get notes about, I like the show for the lightness, you make me laugh, how come it's so heavy today? This is bumming me out. When we go too light, I get the Friday Fabulous Florida. I don't know. It seems fluffy. It seems like a waste. Why can't you get... It's very hard.
Yes.
What we're doing here. We make it look easy, PT. We make it look easy, but it's not, PT. It's not easy. And when I get something that wounds me so deeply...
Why are you yelling?
It cuts me to my core, Kim. It cuts me to my core. And I think Trevor Starr says it best. What I get from that whole email is, the bottom line is, I should be more hostile to Tony. Exactly. So thank you. Tony is getting a free ride around here. Unbelievable. And this is not over, by the way. Someone suggesting, the same person suggesting, that I probably don't even pay my staff minimum wage.
Oh, my.
Albert, the new California minimum wage, I'd like you to start working for the new minimum California wage.
No, thank you. No, thank you. Please don't.
Kim, I'm going to double the California minimum wage, and that will be your new wage. Are you happy with that?
I might be. I don't know.
Really?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Kim.
Please say you are.
I have to do the
It
math.
would
I
save
don't
the
know.
show so much. Really? You don't? Oh my God.
Kim, don't.
Yeah, let me help you. You don't. Anyway, Albert, it's troubling. You know, I almost need therapy when I get a long screed like that. But I am looking forward to dumping on Tony some more.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, we should have a countdown till Monday.
Monday and Tuesday are Tony days. Yeah,
Yeah.
So, 1650. There it is. Congratulations, Albert. Your new wage, $16.50 an hour.
No.
Yes. Thank you for your emails. Thank you for your. You want to put the email up there one time, Albert, if other people have angry comments about the show? It's themarkthompsonshow@gmail.com. We love your letters.
They don't have to be angry.
The comment section because this one was in the comment section.
That's right. If other people want to get into a deep dive,
I've received a lot of positive
you
letters.
can read all of the comments, and these are long comments that this person has left, and then there's some responses. So feel free to get in there and, to your heart's delight, enjoy. Looking forward to it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
What's that, Albert?
Maybe there's going to be a follow-up, so we'll just see if there's another comment for tomorrow.
We don't shy away. Is this PT? Is PT this person? Are they employees or independent contractors? They're independent contractors, I think, on this show. Yeah. Is that you, PT? Or are you? This is great. If you are PT, tell us, are you? Tell me if this is PT. Glad to hear you pay decently. Surprised you were able to. I'm surprised. Let me take that comment and turn it back on you, PT. Hey, PT, I'm surprised that you're surprised. How is that? Huh? I take your surprise, I come back over the top with my surprise. God. Kim, it's not cool is the point. And I think that is PT. And PT...
Why are you yelling?
I'm close to yellow carding you if you are the PT from the comments.
PT has a right to have an opinion. I mean,
it's true. It's true. This is the same PT. Yes, I am the same PT. PT's been identified. PT, it's so odd for you to only use one word when you could use 700 words.
I would say that if we took everyone's opinion about what the show should be and how we should do things and structure it and who we should interview, then it would be a completely different show and it would lose the flavor of what we have, which I think is quite lovely.
Thank you very much, Kim, for a lovely comment. You see, Kim is beautiful on the inside and the outside.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah.
I'll take my bonus at the end of the show.
Yes, I'm looking forward to doubling the minimum wage and giving you that, making that your new wage. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Don't push me, PT. Don't push me. You're this close to a yellow card for that screed you wrote last night. My God. Here I am trying to enjoy the new year, and I get, 4 screens worth of I don't like this, I don't like that, kicking down, self-deprecating. How dare you? How dare you? Albert, it's thrown me off my game. Where should we be now? I think we wanted a...
We got a couple of videos, right? From
No. Yes, but I mean in segments, actually, right. So it's a question of whether you want... Let's do the Epstein thing first. I just want to do a quick wrap on it, and then with the understanding that I'm going to talk to David Katz about the legal aspects of this. These names come out of a civil case, right, against Ghislaine Maxwell, and so that's how we, the public, get them. I want to talk to David Katz more about that, but here's a setup piece.
The judge was overseeing what should have been a routine sentencing when out of nowhere the defendant jumped the bench and lunged for the judge.
No, this is the wrong thing. Now, should I blame Tony for that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony, what is going on with you?
Thanks, Tony.
Let me get the right video.
PT, do you want to put Albert in your next comment? Well, if I yell at him now, good. How could you yell at him? It's an honest mistake.
What have we learned?
It's wait, Albert. Oh my God.
I have it here.
All right, hang on, Albert. Hold on a second. I have to reset. Jeez.
Wow.
I don't want to lose it because I've got PT now.
I don't know.
I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry.
I know it's just feeling that way. I think PT has ruined this show, this hour. I'm blaming you, PT.
Walter says, I guess PT thought it was Festivus, the airing of grievances. Yeah.
I love how PT says, why such a harsh reaction? I wasn't insulting, only explaining. You weren't? You weren't insulting? Go reread your comments. By the way, you better give yourself 30 minutes because you left a lot in the way of comments.
And I
PT.
think at some point he called us underlings. I know you're trying to help us, but you did call us an underling. So.
Gail Guthrie, thank you for the super chat. I absolutely love this show. Big shout out.
Big shout out.
Gail Guthrie is HOF, as you know. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Look, it's the key to this show is that we love all comers, but there is one comer, PT, who you need to recalibrate. I'm suggesting maybe, just chill out a little bit. All right, stand by.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let's get into it. The Epstein list released, sort of. Here's a look.
And Mary, more documents that can actually be released, in the next few days on its way. But the ones released overnight, well, they already mentioned almost 200 people. Now, these are people who knew or worked with the disgraced billionaire, also accusers and potential witnesses. But this does not mean that they had any knowledge of Epstein's crimes or did anything wrong themselves. Now, the documents were released as part of a lawsuit filed against Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who was convicted of sex trafficking underage girls. CBS News is reporting well-known figures such as Britain's Prince Andrew, former governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson, and former U.S. President Bill Clinton are among the people whose names appear in the documents. Now, in the documents, an accuser of Epstein said Epstein described Clinton as a, quote, good friend. But it's important to note the former president has not been accused of abuse, and a spokesperson referred CBS News to a 2019 statement denying Clinton had any knowledge of what he calls Epstein's, quote, terrible crimes. And officials with the FBI submitted a report saying Clinton did not travel to or was present on Epstein's private island between January 1st, 2001 and 2003. Now, according to the Associated Press, former President Donald Trump's name also comes up. The AP said that one of the victims recalls being lured away from a job at Trump's Florida club to become a masseuse for Epstein, a job that involved performing sexual acts. Now, both former presidents factor into the court file, partly because a victim was questioned by lawyers about inaccuracies in newspaper stories. Now, we do know Epstein died by suicide inside the Metropolitan Correctional Center back in 2019.
All right. Well, it's funny how all those sexual predators die by suicide. We discussed that when we were on KGO Radio. I don't believe that it was a straight-up suicide, but more to the point, I will mention this because I think it's a reasonable comment. B.A. Ware says this is easily the biggest non-story of 2024 so far. I mean, well, it is only the fourth day of 2024, but still, I believe it is something of a non-story because we don't really learn anything from this release of names. In this case, B.A. says we learn nothing from this release of names. Trump was also mentioned, Eric says, mentioned at least 7 times. Again, I'm not a Trump fan, as you're aware. I think he's a clear and present danger, but I also try to call it straight, and I don't think there's anything in these documents that would suggest that Trump was involved in sex with underage women, but I don't think there's anything in these documents to suggest that any of these people were. I mean, there's no, the X's and O's of that are not included in these documents. I think you have to separate the wrongdoers on the list from the people that did business with Epstein. Vilma is saying that, and I think that that's right. I mean, hopping on the private jet so you can get a ride to Atlantic City doesn't mean you're guilty of the pedophilic crimes that Epstein's associated with. Mindy Lee says, men. Any questions? Exactly. These are dudes, probably a bunch were up to no good, but in these documents, in this list, there is no information that links them to that necessarily. It's just simple guilt by association, and I try to avoid that. Now, that said, this isn't the end of the list. As was noted in that piece, there'll be more names released later this month, and that will maybe shed some more light on this situation. We'll have to wait on that. And then I want to talk, and as I mentioned this at the top of the show, I want to mention it again now. We want to talk to David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, now defense attorney, who can speak to how something like this is released and the damage it can do, and why the public's right to know essentially trumps any kind of necessity of those on that list to remain private. In other words, your right to privacy somehow is trumped by the public's need to know. Odd to me, but I will ask David about that, and he can put it into some kind of context. So that was the story on the list. Look, Epstein was slimy. I actually know someone who had a dinner, was invited to a dinner. You know the person too, everybody. They were invited to a dinner, and it was Epstein's dinner. He said, I didn't see anything weird going on. He said, I literally just went to the dinner. Now, I know this person very well. Would you consider that person somehow slimy? No. I mean, Epstein had this big bang in life, in this penthouse in Manhattan and with his own island, etc. This person attended a dinner at the Manhattan residence. Now, my point in mentioning it is that guilt by association? So you see how this becomes muddy, this water, and it's a little hard to see the truly guilty, disgusting, vile, grotesque way in which these men were predators, and Epstein leading all those predators, and those who just happened to be on the plane that day. So that's the story on the list so far.
The Mark Thompson Show.
As I mentioned, I'll talk to David Katz about that. The other thing that happened is what happened in a courtroom, and because it happened in a courtroom, I'd like to get law and disorder teed up. Should I do that now, Albert, or should we do it when Kim's news finishes? Let's do it now, can we?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay. How about little law and disorder?
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
I'll get to the Vegas situation in a second, but the Stockton man charged with the murder of that Oakland cop had killed before when he was a teenager. He was charged yesterday with murder, the killing of Officer Tuan Lee. He has a prior manslaughter conviction in connection with a 2014 shootout that killed an 18-year-old. Mark Demetrius Sanders, he's 27. He's facing several other counts on top of this murder charge, including special allegations of second-degree murder of a peace officer in a drive-by shooting. Police earlier identified him as the man who opened fire into an unmarked police truck containing Lee. Lee was on an undercover detail monitoring an early morning burglary at a cannabis business on the 29th of December, last week. Also charged with the murder was 28-year-old Chico resident Alan Starr Brown, who was riding in the vehicle with Sanders, possibly as the driver when Lee was shot. But to me, the extraordinary thing was that Sanders had been arrested on suspicion of homicide before. In April of 2014, when Sanders was 17, the U.S. Marshals arrested him in Modesto in connection with the killing of an 18-year-old. The 18-year-old's name, Marcellus Perry, was killed during a shootout in East Oakland In 2015, Sanders pleaded no contest
Oh, wow.
to voluntary manslaughter. That happened in juvenile court. At 17, he killed somebody and was able to plead no contest in juvenile court. Now, again, you know how I feel about law and order. I think we've lost our way a bit. I think the proliferation of guns, I think the society and culture having changed so much, I think we try a lot of these people as juveniles with the understanding that 18 makes them an adult, and the reality is they're an adult and have come into adulthood decisions prior to being 18. And I would offer this as Exhibit A. In any case, this is a sad coda to a guy's life that already reflected the kind of miserable act associated with murder. So now he's been charged again with the murder of this police officer, Tuan Lee. Meantime, in a Las Vegas courtroom, mayhem unfolds as a defendant charges the judge. I mean, physically charges the judge, and you can see what unfolds. Go ahead, Albert.
What should have been a routine sentencing when out of nowhere the defendant jumped the bench and lunged for the judge. Overnight, a judge attacked in a Nevada courtroom.
What?
Chaos erupting moments after what appeared to be a calm sentencing. Deober Redden, a repeat offender, had pleaded guilty to attempted battery with substantial bodily harm, but argued to Judge Mary Kay Hothus he did not deserve another trip to prison.
I feel like I should be given a shot because I'm in a better place than I was.
The judge reminded Redden of his lengthy criminal record.
3 felonies, a gross, 9 misdemeanors, multiple DVs. Got a lot going on, sir.
Still, he asked for leniency.
I feel that, I shouldn't be, sent to prison for a second time.
But the judge denied his request for probation.
I appreciate that, but I think it's time that he gets a taste of something else because I just can't with that history. In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada, this court...
Moments later, Redden leapt over the defense table and the bench, landed on top of the judge, and sparked a brawl with court officers and attorneys. Courthouse officials telling ABC News Judge Hothus experienced some injuries and her condition is being monitored. The marshal sustained injuries and has been transported to the hospital.
But this video, sadly, is a great example of how vulnerable judges are. If they would have had any information that he was going to do something this outrageous and violent, they either would have restrained him or even done this remotely.
Back in October, Maryland Judge Andrew Wilkinson was found with gunshot wounds in his driveway following a targeted attack. Wilkinson was rushed to the hospital, but later died of his injuries. According to authorities, a document appearing to be Wilkinson's final court order revealed the 52-year-old judge had issued a decision in a divorce believed to involve the alleged shooter.
Judges, in my view, many of them feel vulnerable, and rightly so. I think this case will bring to light the whole idea of how vulnerable judges are in their own courtroom.
The court said it's now reviewing security procedures and will do whatever is necessary to protect judges.
Okay, well, let me just say that you're a little late to the party with reviewing security procedures. It's insanity that guy could get off as many punches as he did. It is, I don't know, to be perfectly frank about it, when I saw this video, I thought, where's the marshal? I mean, there should be a
bailiff standing right there.
Bailiff,
right?
marshal standing there. There should be a peace officer who should break that up. I mean, I don't know if you're checking your Facebook page or what the hell was going on, but I mean, I might put him on administrative leave because I know he's in the hospital right now, but he ought to put himself between the judge and the defendant in a situation like that. I don't think that was, I mean, you've got a defendant running from the defendant's table to the bench. You've got time to close, if you will, even if you just thrown yourself on the judge to protect her. So, I mean,
he came over that desk fast, though. I mean,
okay. But I mean, you've got a peace officer who's armed, and you know, I'm not saying you have to shoot the guy with a bullet. You could tase him. You could do a lot of things, but I just think honestly the security guy is asleep at the switch.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of employees that are on the public dole that are asleep at the switch. There are a lot of employees on the private dole asleep at the switch. But I'm just saying, you know, as that sentencing goes down, come on, you got to be on higher alert than that. So that's one point. The second point is we do tend to give great latitude to this defendant. I mean, you know, he was not restrained in any way. He is there for a violent offense. He was there for a violent assault.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, you know, again.
It turns out her decision was correct. He proved her right?
Even if you don't want the appearance of binding his hands or whatever, then put the shackles on his legs. I don't know. It doesn't strike me as like the Rubik's Cube that everybody is talking like, well, we're going to have to review our policies. Really? Really? It's not hard. Guy's there for a violent offense. You keep him in some kind of restraint.
In some countries, in some states, I've seen pictures of courtroom proceedings where the perpetrator or the person on trial is behind a plexiglass booth. And I think maybe that's the way we have to go, because that's the only way to really keep people safe, that everyone, regardless of who you are, gets to sit in the plexiglass booth. Right?
Yeah, it's indeed. I've seen we ought to put judges behind plexiglass. We ought to have, you know, protective. It's a sad comment, but maybe we do. Right. Maybe we do. In any case, the judge, I mean, they say they're monitoring her condition. It's just, it's brutal and it's remarkable. And, of course, the video is being seen everywhere because it is just those things. That's Law and Disorder for today.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
I have stories from the sky, and I also want to mention that Belinda's coming up with It's the Planet Stupid on Thursdays. Belinda comes through. There are more stories related to everything from water to a major trucking company getting a judgment against it because it installed on its trucks a device to really allow them to conceal the amount of pollutants that were being generated into the environment. I mean, it's pretty wild. The water crisis in the West, it's real. And it's not just in the West. It's worldwide. I have a word about that as well. But Belinda will be here with many stories, those among them, as we continue. Again, Belinda is in the second hour. So David Katz, the first half of the second hour. Belinda, the second half of the second hour. And Kim's news coming up. Smash the like button like a boss.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it with your iron rod. Do it for all that is holy. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and this report is sponsored by Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore.
All right.
The suspected shooter at an Iowa high school is reportedly dead. This is the scene in Perry, at Perry High School in Iowa today. NBC News citing law enforcement officials who also said multiple gunshot victims are injured. The shooting happened this morning at Perry High School. That's about 40 miles northwest of Des Moines. 2 former U.S. presidents, a member of the British royal family, a magician, and the king of pop. Yeah, just a few.
Well, when you put it like that, it sounds like a joke.
Yeah, it does. It's not
walk into a bar.
No,
right, yeah.
Those are just about a few of the 150 names referenced in unsealed court filings related to Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking conspiracy case. So names that are in the documents include Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, David Copperfield, and the late Michael Jackson. Their names and others had previously been redacted from a suit against Ghislaine Maxwell, who was serving a 20-year prison sentence for helping Epstein sexually abuse young girls. So the names tied to Epstein, not necessarily an indication of anyone's guilt for any reason. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading back to the Middle East this week. A State Department spokesperson saying Blinken's priorities are expanding humanitarian aid to Gaza and securing the release of hostages held by Hamas. There's growing concern this war between Israel and Hamas is expanding in this region. Speaking of that, in the California Assembly, kind of hard to see, but you can see the unfurling of banners. Lawmakers are hoping for a quieter session today in the California Assembly. They had to clear out that chamber yesterday, minutes after reconvening for the new year. Protesters caused a disruption when they hung 8 banners and chanted, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. Dozens stayed inside even after the lights were turned off. Outside, more than 100 demonstrators filled the Capitol Rotunda and kneeled around a banner on the ground. So they impeded the work of the California Assembly yesterday. I know nobody wants to hear about this. You know, we want to be done with it. We want to make sure that we don't have to ever look back in the rear view. But here it is again. The COVID crisis far from over in California. The CDC warns the worst is yet to come. The state saw a surge in emergency room visits last month due to holiday gatherings, travel, and a new variant that is spreading really fast. About 80% of the hospital beds were full by Christmas, and the number of lives lost jumped 31%. Some mask mandates have already been reinstated for healthcare workers and visitors, including in Los Angeles County. So COVID,
that's not fake. That's real.
Yeah. Time, if you go to a big gathering, time to mask it up for the next,
Other thing I would just say about that is I was reading several pieces about the fact that the flu virus is back in a big way too, and many people who are even in the hospital for COVID complications also show flu virus. So they're testing positive for both COVID and the flu. So be careful. I mean, it really is a squeeze play. And I have my flu vaccine. I would recommend that older boys and girls certainly get the flu vaccine, but it's probably a good idea for everybody.
Absolutely. And we heard on this very show, UCSF Dr. Peter Chin Hong say the flu vaccine, they picked the right strains this year, so it's very effective at preventing. There you go. Beware of a campaign against higher education. That, according to a university president who resigned this week. Yeah, former Harvard University president Claudine Gay writing in the New York Times in an op-ed today that the push for her resignation was about more than one university and one leader. Gay, who was Harvard's first Black president, was in the center of a campus controversy over anti-Semitism following her testimony at a congressional hearing investigating universities' responses to anti-Israel protests. Yeah, she says it's a campaign against higher education.
Well, these higher education institutions need to recalibrate also. That was not a hard question that she was asked. It was not a hard question that any of those university presidents were asked. And it's insane how this really is such a stain on the liberal establishment that you can't answer a simple question about calling for genocide against Jews, that you can't answer that reflexively and easily. It is an absolute embarrassment. And I agree. She got, and as I said this yesterday, she got hit with the squeeze play. She got hit with that, having blown that, and also having this plagiarism, maybe it's a small p on plagiarism, these accusations, and with both of those things existing in the news cycle during the same 2-week period, she was done. Hey, other university presidents didn't even have the plagiarism thing. They just resigned out of embarrassment and shame as a result, and pressure, most certainly, as a result of that congressional testimony. Anyway, I'm sorry, she was a colossal disappointment. And then when you see Al Sharpton calling it racism or whatever, it just feels again like libs got to get their act together. There's a lot that's great about liberalism, but this way in which they're defending this former university president is shameful.
Let's talk about the NFL for a moment. Why don't we? Lighten it up, lighten things up a little bit. There you go. The NFL, many of this year's top NFL players have been selected to compete in this year's Pro Bowl flag football game. The new format for the 2024 Pro Bowl games at Camping World Stadium in Orlando features a week of player skills challenges, culminating with an all-star flag football game on February 4th. Quarterback Brock Purdy and running back Christian McCaffrey are among league-high 9 selections from the San Francisco 49ers. Hey.
The thing that you need to know about the Pro Bowl is that the players, it's an honor, you could say, to play in it. They're given a little financial bump. But the problem is tackle football, full uniform tackle football, really takes a toll on your body.
Absolutely.
So the last thing they want to do is play yet another game. I mean, look how many games they're playing. If they go into the playoffs, they'll have 21 games and many say that playing an NFL football game is like going through a car accident, and you're doing it every single week. So this makes much more sense for their health, a flag football contest. I don't know that it's going to have the same appeal as the game where they put the helmets and pads on, but it's definitely the healthier option.
Yeah, they did it last season, and it was just okay. I think people are more interested in like the skills competition. Well, I am, but I don't think overall a lot of people care, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, the commish says on a 10 scale, sounds like it's not even a 5.
No. The dodgeball is pretty interesting. It's nice to see grown men, and not even grown men, probably the top percentile of athlete play dodgeball against each other.
You can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball.
Dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge. Yep.
Lastly, Elvis Presley will be making his debut on the London stage as an AI holograph. I don't know. Do we want this? I'm not sure.
Maybe.
Well, maybe. The British company Layered Reality says their new show, Elvis Evolution, will use artificial intelligence and groundbreaking technology to recreate the seismic impact of seeing Elvis live for a whole new generation of fans.
I'll ding seismic.
There's
never been anything like it. I'll tell you that.
There's never been anything like this.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not live. It's a hologram.
Wait a minute. Commish, didn't they do a hologram of Tupac?
Yeah, I think for Coachella a few years ago. I think they did a Tupac thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is with AI, which is like the new, buzzword type thing. So anyway, go ahead, Kim. What are they going to do?
They're going to recreate the seismic impact of seeing Elvis live for a whole new generation of fans. Their news release says a life-sized digital Elvis will share his most iconic songs and moves for the very first time on a UK stage.
Wow.
Put up your pants, my man. Pull up those pants.
Yeah, he'll be doing those hip moves.
I mean, it's what they make him do. It's not a live performance. It's someone controlling a little hologram image.
Well,
let me kick down the door and talk to my cheap sons and daughters.
Yeah. Get your asses in there and check out Elvis. It is weird. Kim brings up something either deliberately or inadvertently, which is quite, I think, provocative. And it's this. If you take the AI image of these performers who've passed, and then, as Kim says, you make them do these things, right? You've programmed the AI so that they're doing things that they might otherwise not do. That would really, I would think, offend the legacy of that performer. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to do that. It seems to me like they're going to use a lot of the AI and the data that's associated with young Elvis, and they're just going to kind of recreate it. I think it could be kind of cool. But I'm just saying, you could see the deep fake type aspect of shame that you could bring on a performer's legacy. That's all I'm saying.
That's weird.
You're going to hear a lot of, Elvis would never do that or whatever. That, because Elvis, you can have, look at this. Maybe Elvis can join the Beatles, says John Watson. You could literally have Elvis, the Beatles, Michael Jackson, all of them on stage at one time. If you
it could be a
use
star
this technology.
There's never been anything like this.
Right, exactly.
This report is sponsored by the superstars at Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. You can get your 10% off. We've been so lucky to have the folks at Tenuta Vineyards sponsor the newscast and the Mark Thompson Show, and so lucky that they continue to offer this 10% off to Mark Thompson Show listeners. All you have to do is call Rich at Tenuta and say, smash it with your iron rod.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Thank you. And you get your 10% off. The number is 925-699-4576, 925-699-4576. And if you want some wonderful wine, if you want to check out their facilities, you can drive out there. They've got a beautiful tasting room. They've got some great conference rooms. You can have a party out there. You can have all kinds of things going on. And they have events. So check the website as well. Tenuta Vineyards in Livermore. Again, the number 925-699-4576. Say smash it with your iron rod and get your discount. I'm Kim McAllister. This is the Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
Yes, I'm very unhappy with everything I've heard today on your show.
Yes. I didn't want to leave today's first hour without reminding you that we count on you, the audience, to remain in business here. You've just heard how even PT, who is the close to yellow-carded listener and viewer today, was surprised by how well everyone's compensated on this show. That is because we have an audience that supports us. You can support us, if you'll put up the website, it's themarkthompsonshow.com. And at themarkthompsonshow.com, there are live links to Patreon and PayPal, also to our merch site. If you want to really be part of the brigade, you can go to the merch site and grab one of these attractive mugs that's behind me. Also the lovely throw pillow that you can see. There is the tote bag. And, of course, the hoodie, which is sported by Pulitzer Prize winner David K. Johnston. So you can be one of the cool kids. Yeah. Yes. It's all there. There it is. Albert has it up for you. In addition to those things I just mentioned, you can see the Mark Advanced hydration system, the stainless steel water bottle, sensibly priced. And the stickers, what I've done is actually use the stickers and applied them to other mugs in the house. That's as a... and you can get the sticker. That's a sticker with my face. I don't know if you necessarily... But they're all there for your enjoyment. Maybe PT would like to... Yeah, PT might enjoy something from the website.
I love the wiggling. Very, very done.
Yeah, you can... PT can yell at the merch when we're not on live. There's a tumbler. There's the hat. There's the bottle opener. Maybe get into the throw pillow.
Mm-hmm.
Get a starter set of the lower price stuff. I think the bottle opener is low priced. I think there you go for $10. Get you in a bottle of. Sir, what's it going to take to get you in a bottle opener today? And then, of course, you have the pot holder, which I think is the perfect complement for every kitchen. Is the Mark's Magic pot holder. So I do recommend it. Again, sensibly priced. You can find a hot link to all of it. That's at getmarkmerch.com if you want to go there directly.
Weed smokers at?
Getmarkmerch.com. It's not that kind of pot holder. TheMarkThompsonShow.com. Click Patreon or PayPal to become a regular contributor. And there are also links to the merch. But if you want to go right to the merch, it's getmarkmerch.com. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Hey, how about a shout out to Hula Steph for a $3 super sticker?
Big shout out.
Thank you. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to be acknowledging a bunch of people, Patreon and PayPal people who have been here a long time, but we acknowledge all of the people on Patreon and PayPal. We update the list monthly, and we run those credits at the end of every show. And if you watch the end of every show, those who are the biggest contributors are in the biggest font, but everybody's name gets in there because we're so grateful for your ongoing support. Deborah B., how about a 10 spot?
Big shout out.
Big shout out, Deborah. Thank you so much, or thank you so much, as I like to say.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. It always sounds a little more
Thank you so much.
better when it's British. Don't you agree? By the way, next week, I think we'll talk to our favorite Britisher, Anthony Davis.
Oh, I like him.
He will be, I know that Kim likes him, and we all like him. That's why he's coming back. So he of the Midas Touch Network. All right, I wanted to...
The Mark Thompson Show.
I did want to mention one thing that's going on because the pure politics of the immigration battle is being played out with photo ops and live back and forths that the GOP is doing from the border. And the next government shutdown, and there is a government shutdown looming, will likely be about immigration and the border. House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, as they go at it, they avoided a shutdown in October and November, but at a much hyped appearance at the Texas border with Mexico House Speaker Mike Johnson, appearance at the Texas border with Mexico, House Speaker Mike Johnson, I wish we could make him the Mexico House Speaker. House Speaker Mike Johnson at the border there, as I was just saying, said House Republicans wanted their entire immigration restriction bill passed. Even as back in Washington, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, said that that's not going to happen. These are the first public remarks in the new year, highlighting another, again, emerging round of political back and forth before this possible shutdown. So we want to get the border closed and secured first, and we want to make sure we reduce non-defense discretionary spending. According to Mike Johnson, those are his words. I'll just remind you, there is no way to close and secure the border under these circumstances. This is not an even doable thing. And much of what they are talking about is just so much political posturing. It's remarkable. They say that H.R. 2, which comes out of the House, it's their immigration spending proposal. This isn't a real immigration policy. They say that it will fix these problems. But Schumer says the House, of course, the House in control of the GOP, the House clings to H.R. 2. We're not going to get a deal on the supplemental spending. So let's be clear. The shutting down of the government is something that the GOP wants. It only helps the GOP if the government is shut down. Now, you may say, well, I don't know about that. And we can ask Michael Schur about this tomorrow. But won't the government shutdown hurt the GOP? Isn't it going to be a smear on the GOP? Isn't there going to be a stink about the GOP and the fact that they can't keep the government open? It's going to be spun, right? The Democrats will be blamed. And I'm not saying that everybody's going to buy the spin, but I'm saying that it's not so clear that the GOP is shutting down the government. It should be clear, but it's not. This from the Huffington Post. There's an appetite among House Republicans to shut down the government, or at least a sign of seriousness about stopping illegal immigration. The agencies are funded only through January 19th, including the Department of Veterans Affairs, Energy, Transportation, Treasury, HUD, Housing and Urban Development. Mm-hmm. So Johnson is saying, we're willing to shut down the government if there are no border changes. He also wants to cut spending outside of the Pentagon. And there may be those among you who feel as though the spending associated with the Ukraine defense, with Israel, you may feel as though you want to take a meeting on that. You may not be supporting that. I would say two things. First of all, these things that we do and decisions that are made by lawmakers at gunpoint, it's a dangerous way to shape policy. The second thing I would say, just from a 30,000-foot view, is that the amount of money that's actually directed to Ukraine and Israel it's really almost a rounding error compared to the overall operating budget of the United States. I'm not saying it's not significant. And I'm also not saying that philosophically it's not significant. I mean, but in an already compromised philosophically body like the U.S. Congress, I just suggest that keeping the government running is of critical importance. A government shutdown destroys the markets. It destroys investment in the U.S. I'm talking about foreign investment, domestic investment. It destroys your 401k. It really does serious damage to any number of things, all just to make a political point.
Yep.
So,
but I don't think they think about it that way. They think of the people that are behind them say, "Oh, look, they're doing something. They're stirring things up." Right? They're taking a stand, and they're at least doing something, where really doing nothing or less than nothing is not doing something.
This is an interesting comment just for the realities around the Pentagon. Jason says, I don't want to hear another word about spending until Pentagon completes an audit. Well, of course you're right. And the Pentagon, and you can Google this, Albert, you can note for all of us, you can Google any of these things that I say.
Stop picking on Brett.
What?
Where's my Google it?
Google it.
Oh, there it is. Everything's all messed up because of the machine being down. The Pentagon is out of control. You know, I grew up in Washington, D.C., and, you know, so you go to school with a lot of defense contractor kids and all the rest. And look, you need defense, and not a lot of defense contractors are evil, but all defense contractors, I would say, pad the budget. I mean, the Pentagon is out of control on spending, and the budgets are out of control. The weapon systems and spending on the sophisticated weapon systems, many of which do not work. They bloat this Pentagon budget, and as I said to you before, a lot of that Pentagon money never leaves the Beltway. It doesn't actually do anything. Meantime, we are vulnerable as a nation. We're vulnerable mostly in a cyber way. I mean, the next frontiers of real battle will be done across the web. It'll be done with our systems and our vital infrastructure that is affected by the web. So you need to, in the cyber world, build your walls in any case. And you need to secure your border, of course. But I'm just suggesting on the Pentagon, it's unauditable. You know, they tried to audit the Pentagon, and there is an audit underway now, supposedly. But after 5 years of auditing the Pentagon, they came up and they said, this is literally unauditable. We spent millions auditing the billions that goes into the Pentagon. So that's the history of audits when it comes to the Pentagon. It's not a pretty one. So, Randy says we spend a lot of money on weapon systems that the military actually doesn't want, but provides jobs for people in congressional districts. That's certainly true. And that's the sleight of hand that the defense contractor world does. They put a little bit of business in all 50 states, and as a result, they get their budget approved no matter what. So, all right, that's a word on the border and the politics of a government shutdown. We'll do more with Michael Schur tomorrow.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I do want to get, Kim, if you would, can we do a turbo news? I have David Katz standing by.
Yeah.
Smash the like button if
Smash
you would.
it with your iron rod.
Kim's news, and then the distinguished former federal prosecutor, now working the defense side of the table, David Katz, joins us next. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. The man at the center of one of the Navy's largest corruption and bribery cases is back in the United States. Former defense contractor Leonard Glenn Francis, also known as Fat Leonard, was in a San Diego court this week. He fled the country in 2022, but was returned to the United States as part of a prisoner swap deal with Venezuela. Took almost a year and a half to have him sent back to the U.S., where he has now appeared in court for the first time since his escape. Property Club out with a list of the 10 most dangerous neighborhoods in the Los Angeles area. Downtown LA tops the list with a crime rate that is 530% higher than the national average. The West Adams neighborhood, number 2, statistically 1 in 15 residents living in that South LA neighborhood will become victim of a crime. The Wholesale District, including Skid Row, 3rd on the list. A crime is committed there every 2 hours. Rounding out the top 10, Hollywood, South Los Angeles, Compton, Watts, Koreatown, the Fashion District, and North Hollywood. In the Bay Area, at least a half dozen protesters were taken into custody last night at People's Park near UC Berkeley. The protesters are opposed to UC Berkeley building a housing complex at the park. UC Berkeley's spokesman Dan Mogulof saying the university urgently needs student housing. Some of the protesters, though, clashed with police. The streets adjacent to the park will be closed for the next few days while crews build a perimeter out of shipping containers. That wall is expected to create a barricade against any further disruptions. The California Department of Public Health is warning consumers not to eat a particular brand of jam or molasses. The warning applies to Shemshad's mulberry molasses and mulberry jam. The jarred products are potentially contaminated with the bacteria that causes botulism. Ingesting botulism can lead to illness, serious illness, or death. The products are sold at local grocery stores, including Woodland Hills Market in Woodland Hills, Q Market in Van Nuys, Wholesome Choice Market in Irvine. And you should call your state health officials if you have these products. Throwing them away apparently can spread the bacteria. So,
oh my God, you can't even throw them away.
No,
That's not fake. That's
so
real.
bad.
Wow.
They got to come pick it up, I guess. I don't know.
Jeez.
Yikes. Whatever happened in that jar is no bueno.
Man.
This report is sponsored
Wow.
by
No.
Exactly. What?
ValleyCoffee.com. Always
Yeah.
good and never toxic. A great place to get a wonderful cup of coffee.
I've had number 9 of my 11 espresso shots today.
Well, you fill your Mark Thompson Show coffee mug up with this little slice of heaven. Find a huge selection of coffees and amazing teas. It is a treat just for you. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Get your exclusive 10% discount just for being a Mark Thompson Show listener. Put in Mark T all together at checkout, Mark T, and enjoy the good stuff. I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
Yes,
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Shadow Stevens. This is the Mark Thompson Show. Keep it to yourself.
What was it was Shirley? You almost heard Shirley?
yes, I'm very
Oh,
unhappy
that's the
with
one,
everything
yeah.
I've heard today on your show.
I'll tell you what you will love. The guy, this is my little guilty pleasure, is going on the web and YouTube and finding all the places from overseas, in London, in England, in New York, and then in different stations across the country, Los Angeles, etc., where David Katz appears with his legal mind analyzing really complex legal situations. You hear him on London radio. You hear him on and see him on London television. And as I say, across this great country, most grateful that he spends time with us. Happy New Year and a welcome to the former federal prosecutor now working the defense side of the table in California. How about it for David Katz, everybody?
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year, sir. Very, very cool. And wow, you have met your moment. 2024 looks as though it will be problematic and provocative from a legal perspective. I want to ask you first about a story that you, in the first hour, there are many saying, well, this is a non-story. And you could say that there are parts of the Epstein thing that is sort of a non-story and that we knew a lot of these various characters were associated with Epstein, meaning they might have ridden his plane or whatever. And I was speaking about guilt by association. And you can speak to this as well. But I also want to talk to you, or at least get a thought from you, about how this stuff, these private associations that people have with Epstein or anyone, just in general, become public, and how the public need to know trumps whatever right to privacy people have.
Well, great to be with you. And, you know, one of the reasons that they're so interested in the United Kingdom about this story is, of course, the Prince Andrew connection.
Sure.
Prince Andrew it's been reported, settled for a multi-million-dollar amount with Virginia Giuffre. And she's the one who started, along with others, of course, but she's known for having started this civil litigation with very good lawyers. And of course, Jeffrey Epstein's story is an interesting one as well as a frightening one. I mean, being a sex trafficker is a terrible thing, and having become so prominent. And what was his relationship with all of these very wealthy people? And how did he go from being a high school dropout to being worth millions and millions of dollars and owning supposedly the most luxurious, urban mansion in New York City? And then, of course, all the famous people who flocked around there. And they're going to say, Mark, that, they really didn't know, especially the ones who didn't enter the mansion. And so that is very important. I mean, what we have right now is a sort of a name and shame. And, there's all kinds of celebrities who've been brought in there. And you really think they probably just flew on a plane one time, or maybe there was a question asked about them at a deposition. And, this latest document dump is the 8th tranche of information about this case. And the reason it's been 8, and it looks like this will be the last one, is because we do seal records. Now let's get into this issue about how we seal records. So somebody files a civil suit against somebody else. We have this idea of public courts. When there's a trial, we have this idea that any member of the public can walk into the courtroom and see what's going on. And any member of the public or the press could go look through the documents in the case, in the file, or now go see them online. We file public. When I file as a federal criminal defense attorney a motion about my client, generally speaking, the whole world can see it. In fact, lawyers who like my writing style or analytical style can poach some of my great lines. It's public, right? It's just one of those things. It becomes like a template. And I've looked on there and seen, some of the great criminal defense attorneys, how they phrase certain things, and they're public. Anyway, the problem, though, there's a couple of things. First of all, we do protect privacy in obvious ways, people's social security numbers, maybe a date of birth, anything that would help an identity thief. You actually have an obligation as an attorney to redact that before you submit the document on a public file. If you have a youth victim, and of course, this case is replete with youth victims, young women who were trafficked. We don't want their names to come out. We don't want their whole lives to be, under the shadow of their name or their date of birth having been released in a court pleading. But beyond that, we do have this idea that it's so humiliating. It's such a loss of reputation to even be mentioned in one of these cases. And that's how we got to this point. That's how we got to 200 names, 150 names being redacted. And so at each point when the press and, the Miami Herald really followed this case, they were tenacious. They deserve a lot of praise. Let me just digress for 1 minute, because they keep mentioning Clinton and somehow using this as a cudgel against Democrats. First of all, Trump's name is in there prominently. But on top of that, you look at the Jeffrey Epstein saga. He started off being investigated down in southern Florida, where he had this mansion in Palm Beach. He started being investigated down there for this sex trafficking and so forth. And the federal prosecutor gave him a non-prosecution agreement. The case just went to state prosecution, and he had a guaranteed sentence of, let's say, a year, 15 months. And he was allowed to be on home detention. That's been a notorious aspect of the case. But the U.S. attorney who agreed to that sweetheart deal and to the non-prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein went on to be in Trump's cabinet and then had to resign in disgrace from Trump's cabinet. So, Trump and Clinton, this is not a partisan thing at all. And then after that, he was able to go to New York City. I guess he was already in New York City, but to establish himself. So some people say, well, I didn't know what, he was up to. And of course, anybody who wanted to check could have checked that he did have this criminal case down in southern Florida. It wasn't a federal conviction, but certainly he was a good person to beware of, right? And these people who didn't beware of him and who should have known better, of course, they're all kicking themselves. But that doesn't mean the fact that they've been named and shamed, that they were involved in any criminality. In fact, they were not involved in any criminality as we understand it. These people were not prosecuted for anything. And some of them, it looks like, I mean, for real, were on humanitarian missions over to Africa and other places like that to distribute necessary drugs and to distribute aid over there. And Jeffrey Epstein's in-kind contribution was to provide the plane and the pilot. So if you want to go deliver malaria drugs, and your former UN representative Bill Richardson, okay, it doesn't mean that you stopped on the way back at the so-called sex island of Jeffrey Epstein. You went on the flight, you came back. Clinton went on the flight and he came back, and it was a great thing for, humanitarian charitable purposes. And, as to him being on this sex island, former President Clinton, the flight logs don't back up that claim that he was on the sex island, and the Secret Service records don't. Now, you can have any idea that you want that somebody thought ahead to, excise or not create those Secret Service records, but it just seems improbable. And so everyone is not only presumed guilty, but really and truly, you have to always emphasize that while this is certainly blame and shame, or name and shame, and nobody would want to have their name in there, it really doesn't mean that there was any criminality or even any civil liability or any wrongdoing just because someone's name is in there, Mark.
I kind of was making the same point, this guilt by association thing, and I love the fact that you call it name and shame, because I think that's exactly what it is. I just wonder, though, David, just to my question, why and how you've mentioned the way certain things like Social Security and other personal information is redacted, why these names also don't enjoy that same privacy. I mean, again, because of the shame factor, isn't there a damage done to be, and I don't mean to speak on behalf of rich people and politics, I'm just talking about generally now for all of us. Isn't there a shame factor that people have to endure just by virtue of the fact that they're mentioned as having in some way showed up on the plane of this guy? But why is their privacy not protected?
Well, there's about 150, 200 people who've been named at one point or another. In this latest tranche, there are some additional ones. And of course, every time a new name surfaces, you're right, that's a new person who gets named and shamed. First of all, if you don't have a lot of money, it's very difficult to stop it. I mean, just as a practical matter, because you have to hire a lawyer. What this federal judge in the Southern District of New York in New York City, what she did was you could go in front of her and object. And basically you take a look at the document that they're about to unseal, and you could say, hey, wait a second, there's this wrong with it and that wrong with it. But I think the argument that, it mentions me and I didn't do anything wrong, I think the answer to that is when it comes out, you tell that to the press and to anyone else. It names me, but I didn't do anything wrong, if that's your only reason. But you have to hire a lawyer to make that objection. And if you don't like it, you have to hire a lawyer. You don't like her ruling, which is going to be unseal it as to you, then you have to hire a lawyer to go into the Court of Appeals. It's not a criminal case. You don't get an appointed lawyer. And there are some people who are at the appellate stage or are still in front of her. So let's say there are 10 or 12 people whose cases are on appeal, whose cases are in front of her. They have not been named yet. And it looks like there will be some people who maybe will not be named. And I don't know if you can make the argument, for instance, that I have a credible threat against me because of this or because of that. I teach in the school system now, I'm going to be fired. I imagine some people are making claims like that, and maybe those will be valid. But generally, Mark, we have this idea of public courts. And if somebody
it's the public. It's the public courts part of this that just makes it impossible to evade exposure as someone who at least knew the defendant in this case.
And one last thing, the Miami Herald has pushed this very assiduously because the Epstein criminal saga sort of is centered on Southern Florida. So they've got the lawyers, they've got the time, they've got the motivation. And some people think this is the great thing about our country. We have a free press that presses and presses. And so we don't have star chambers. We don't have, we don't have government out of the sunshine. We have things like this. But obviously in a case like this, and the judges had to balance that as she's gone along, Mark. And I think she said in the privacy interest, the fairness of not being shamed in this way has been paramount. That's why we're all these years down the road. This litigation started in about 2016. One of the interesting chestnuts that has come out recently is that they wanted to take the deposition of Bill Clinton right around the time Hillary Clinton was running against Trump. And he won a motion in front of the predecessor judge that he could not be deposed And I believe that litigation was secret. I don't think that we've known generally that they tried to take Bill Clinton's deposition during the campaign between Hillary and Trump, and that his motion was granted. I think that would have been a huge story at the time. You know, Clinton resists deposition. What insider judge, what deep state judge ruled in Clinton's favor? I don't think in general that we've known that. And you could say that, you know, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you could say, wait a second, something was up. But, you know, federal judges have historically been very, very fair, not partisan. I know we've had some arguments with the U.S. Supreme Court and people like Thomas on the Supreme Court. But generally, and, you know, this judge down in Texas, the judge, you know, the one we lovingly call Loose Cannon down in Florida. But generally, you know, the fact that somebody was appointed by picked by a Republican, picked by a Democrat, we've had pretty good success. Generally speaking, I don't want to be Pollyanna. So when I see something like that, I think that, well, former President Clinton had good arguments, not that somehow the judge was biased in his favor some way or the other.
I'm glad you mentioned the Supreme Court, and yes, assiduously is a ding word. I would ask you about something that's going on with Trump and the Supreme Court and judges, and you segued almost perfectly into it. The questions that are associated with the insurrection clause and the this 14th Amendment, which we talk about from time to time now because of the removal of Trump's name from the primary ballots in Colorado and in Maine. The question now is kicked to the Supreme Court, and then there's a question of immunity about this extends well beyond this issue of being on the ballot, and yet it's all about being on the ballot. The notion that the president is top of the pyramid such that he's granted complete immunity, he or she, in this case he. It may go to the Supreme Court. It looks as though, I mean, it may go to a Supreme Court decision. You have, and you'll remind me, David, my recollection is that you had suggested that the Supreme Court may knock it down to the state level, or what so I need to be reminded of that. And I also need you to speak to the notion that the Trump people, through their surrogates, Maggie Haberman, for example, of the New York Times, Trump's lawyer was appearing on CNN, they seem to be expressly making the point that Supreme Court appointees who are right-wing GOP appointees shouldn't bend over backwards to seem to be doing the politically neutral thing. They should do the right thing for America. It's like an express pressure that they're putting on these Supreme Court justices. So I've said a lot, asked a lot. Now you, please.
Well, I think there are two different cases that have kind of gotten conflated. And so by some of the commentators, the presidential immunity, the idea that the president can do anything and that a president cannot be prosecuted for things that the president did in the course and scope of his or her duties. That's the argument in the motion in front of the court in D.C. District Court, which says that Trump can't be prosecuted criminally in federal court for the insurrectionary acts that he took, for the slates that he knew were bogus, for obstructing justice regarding the run-up to the election, after the election, and all the way up to the January 6th insurrection. That idea that he has presidential immunity, and Jack Smith just filed a motion where, or he filed his response to the president's filings, which said this can't be right. It cannot be that the president sicks the Department of Justice on political enemies. How about if evidence gets planted, or that's even part of it to plant evidence? Can it be that a president can actually arrest or do worse than arrest to his main political enemies and then say later on, well, I was just enforcing the laws? And particularly when it comes to the state elections that were being held, the argument is that even if there is some course and scope that the president can act in, like let's say making a treaty or encouraging the military in a foreign country, for which the president cannot be prosecuted. Let's take the example, somebody right now, someone comes along and they want to prosecute Trump because Trump over-favored Netanyahu. He didn't rein in Netanyahu's settlement policies. He didn't rein in him trying to change the Supreme Court. And they can prove that Trump did that. Well, that seems like something in the course and scope, which is different from him sicking the Department of Justice, or even having the Department of Justice conniving and then planting evidence on a political rival, or arresting without any justification just for political reasons. So those two seem to be different. And that's why I think that the courts, including the DC Circuit that's about to rule, I think they're about to rule that there is no presidential immunity as such, and that the Supreme Court will probably stay away from that case. It's very hard, to predict the future, as they say. But I think that that's what's going to happen in that case. Totally separate from that, Mark, is the Colorado Supreme Court having said that Trump cannot appear on the ballot in the Colorado primary, Republican primary, because he engaged in the insurrection. And if you're an originalist, if you're a textualist, which is what these so-called right-wing U.S. Supreme Court justices say they are, they admit it, they're proud textualists and originalists. Well, read the language. The 14th Amendment says, right, that having taken an oath to support the Constitution, if you then engage in an insurrection, that you are disqualified from running, just like if you were 25 years old, just like Arnold Schwarzenegger, you were not a natural born citizen of the United States. So that's what's kicking around in all of that. And my prediction on that has been that one way or another, this will not result in Trump not being able to run in all 50 states and not being able to run in the primaries in all 50 states. And I believe Trump will be able to run, if he's the nominee, against Biden in the general election. Now, how exactly the U.S. Supreme Court is going to get there is what's confounded people, because it does seem like our elections in America are, even for president, are state functions. Each state, somehow or another, through an election in that state on election day, but also through acts of the legislature. We saw that where Trump, in my opinion, tried to do the big steal and get away with stealing the election when he ran against Biden. But there's ways that after the election, or in combination with the election in each state, the state legislature can act in certain ways. Remember, all kinds of people can act in certain ways, and you can say, well, that actually violated the federal Constitution. But Mark, most of them have been rejected, because pretty much the state sets the terms of the state elections, even for president. So it makes it difficult for the U.S. Supreme Court to say, wait, Colorado, as a sovereign state, did something wrong in how Colorado's Supreme Court decided under its law, it's interpreted for its law, the U.S. Constitution, to say, reading the text of the 14th Amendment, it says an insurrectionist cannot run, and therefore we're enforcing that in the state of Colorado. Having said all that, Mark, I just don't see it. I think that the likely ways that they will duck this issue, remember, they can't duck it, they have to decide it. Now, one thing, Mark, is that the primary ballots have gone out because they took some action. The U.S. Supreme Court took some action. Colorado's Secretary of State has sent out ballots that list in Colorado Trump, as well as Haley, as well as the other people who want to be the Republican nominee in Colorado. So the ballots have gone out. So there's a way, I guess, the Supreme Court could kind of like Bush v. Gore, and then say, this doesn't apply to anything else, but here's our ruling right now. Let the ballots go out. Or primaries aren't covered. Mark, there's a way to say primaries really aren't covered. They're kind of different. And finally, one of the provocative arguments, I don't know if it's a winner or not, but a provocative argument is that you basically can keep running. You have a federal right, they might say, to keep running in every single state. And then if you're going to not be allowed to actually assume the presidency, that one's up to the Congress. And the idea would be, let's say what Schwarzenegger could have done. Schwarzenegger could have run in every state. Everyone said, my God, you're not a natural born citizen. His lawyers would have fought that off. If he'd have won the election, then Congress would have had to decide, right, on January 6th, when they certify the winner, and we could have a debacle like we saw on that January 6th with Trump, but hopefully that will never happen again, or anything like it will ever happen again. But it seems to be politically, this is my political commentary, not so much legal. That's a terrible system to have. Can you imagine if somehow Trump had either won or lost, but it was close. And now the Congress has to decide whether to finally disqualify Trump because he engaged in insurrection from assuming the presidency the next time, that everything else is sort of not final. Trump can keep running and running. And then eventually it's up to the Congress whether to seat him as president. In other words, whether to count the votes from or not, or to say, you know what, we're not counting any of them because he engaged in insurrection. I can't imagine the Congress doing that. And so Trump may feel like no matter what happens, keep running, keep fighting, and the Congress on January 6, 2025 will not bar him from assuming the presidency. So as I've always said, and I'll start my monologue, okay, organize, vote. Don't assume any of these things are going to stop Trump from running in all 50 states. Organize in all 50 states and vote if you don't want him to be the president again.
Well, I would say this too, just in general, based on what you've just said. And I always think that we've gotten fat and happy in America with a system that's pretty well flawed, but it's kind of worked or whatever. It's only been in the last, few cycles, presidential cycles, that we go, wait a minute, you realize the fragility of the system, the way you describe it, that essentially, as I understand it now, because it is state by state and there's a certain sanctity to the way that the states are treated. Like, we really can't get involved in the way they do their voting. And I know that there's some exceptions when it comes to, every civil rights and this sort of thing. But that a Secretary of State could essentially invalidate the vote if they don't like it, or other officer alongside Secretary of State, with the power to essentially invalidate the people's voice in the state. That's kind of what you've said, David Katz.
I think every state has a mechanism so that you can challenge the Secretary of State. It's still administrative action that can be challenged in the courts. And one of the things that's interesting about this case, Mark, is it's all happening so fast. And I think that the U.S. Supreme Court is really going to try to find a way to let these primaries go forward. And then I think there have to be challenges to the general election that are made as timely as possible, and to give the courts as much time as possible. But I just have a feeling, and I don't mean to depress anyone, that at the end of the day, and I don't know if it's exactly how they're going to get there, but at the end of the day, the U.S. Supreme Court will not issue a ruling that leaves things. Every state can do what it wants to do. All 50 states, it all depends what the Secretary of State decides and what each state court decides. I do think that there's a couple of things wrong with that, sort of like they thought in Bush v. Gore. The only, I think, plausible defense of Bush v. Gore was not a legal one, but a policy one, that things were going to spin out of control unless the recount stopped and unless that election got called for one or the other. I think I don't agree with the decision. I think that's the only plausible defense for it. And I think that the U.S. Supreme Court is thinking, is this going to be a good decision? Is this going to be good for the country? And that's, I guess, the urge for them to think of what's good for the country, and not so much the legalisms, because the legalisms, Mark, as I say, if you're an originalist, you're a textualist. Did he engage? Well, he had due process in Colorado. He had a trial. And he said he didn't engage and that this didn't constitute an insurrection. And as the, I think, Maine Secretary of State said, kind of citing what happened in Colorado, she said, I know no Secretary of State has ever kept a presidential candidate off the ballot, but we've never had a presidential candidate who did anything like what Trump did. He encouraged his followers to come to Washington, D.C. He said it's going to be wild. He encouraged those slates, which were phony. He tried to vault that lower official at the Department of Justice into the top job so that that official could issue a fraud alert when there was no fraud. He did all those things down in Georgia, which he's being prosecuted along with his henchmen. Are there any henchwomen? I guess there are, down there in Georgia. And then he gave those incendiary speeches at the Ellipse. He said, fight like hell. He had Giuliani give that speech. That was also inflammatory. And
well,
then,
to a mob that he knew was armed. I mean, it's there's chapter and verse on this, and then you have, and this is what worries me. We got to wrap up, David Katz, but he had a phalanx of lawyers, Sidney Powell and Eastman, and all the rest who are ready to do the dirtiest of work for him. And I think that may, and we can talk about this next week, that may be the future. I mean, I think the notion. That's why I say you've met your moment. I think the courts. That's increasingly going to be where this next presidential election ends up. And then you end up with it being kicked to Congress, and then it becomes a GOP victory because it just goes every state gets one vote. We can talk about that next time. But I just, David, I see, more American time spent in a courtroom than ever before when it comes to these elections. So,
well, I think Trump is going to try to use even these federal court hearings. He supposedly wants to go to the argument in front of the U.S. Supreme Court if they grant an argument, and he'll be out there posturing and trying to turn that to his political advantage. And, this one may even turn more to his advantage because this is not the Colorado Supreme Court decision, banning him that's going up to the U.S. Supreme Court. That is not criminality. He's got 2 federal criminal cases, which are incredibly serious. He's got 2 state criminal cases against him, and appearing in front of them, you kind of shake your head and think, my God, this guy's campaigning for president, standing in front of his own criminal trial. Do people realize that? But now he'll be standing in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, right, in what's a civil administrative dispute, and he's going to try to play this for all it's worth. So my last words: vote, organize, don't wait for the courts. You can wait to hear what David Katz has to comment about the courts, but don't wait for the courts to stop Trump. If you want to stop Trump, vote, organize. Tell everybody in a swing state to get involved, go to the polls.
The great former federal prosecutor, now defense lawyer. There he is, a viewer having merged Nostradamus and David Katz. We call him Katzadamus, and his predictions are pretty accurate. So we look forward to next week. Thank you, David Katz.
Great to be with you. Very accurate so far. Very accurate.
So far. Very impressive, sir. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I have Belinda waiting with It's the Planet. I saw something from Tom. Phalanx is a ding word. That is true.
Yeah.
And I also saw there's a move in Florida. I saw that, Kim, too.
Just a couple stories before we get to Belinda. First of all, 5 people with a voting rights group are challenging Donald Trump's presidential campaign in Illinois now as well. The Sun-Times reporting the objection was filed today with the State Board of Elections to disqualify Trump as a candidate in both the March 19th primary and the November 5th general election. And a South Florida political activist is filing a civil lawsuit in Broward County Circuit Court, attempting to block Trump from appearing on Florida's 2024 presidential ballot. So those are the 2 stories that are coming in.
It's a gaggle of people and court cases now to keep Trump off the ballot or get him off the ballot. Here you go for a phalanx, by the way. Thank you, Kim. Stay close. I want to do news about the environment, about the planet. We do it on Thursdays in a segment we call It's the Planet, Stupid.
The planet Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet
Earth. A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet Stupid. No. It's the planet Stupid.
Our guide for It's the Planet Stupid, Belinda Weymouth. Happy New Year. Look at you, Belinda, my darling.
Hi.
With the Save the Whale shirt on. How appropriate.
Well, I thought I'd better dress for my brand. It actually says, "Save the whales, save our souls." Can you see that?
I see. Okay.
So I'm really bringing it.
Well, that's great. There's a lot to get to, so I'll let you take the lead here and tell me where you want to start.
Okay. Well, as per usual, there is a lot going on out there. So there are a couple of good things and then a couple of not so good things. Let's start with a good thing. An amazing fine, the second biggest environmental fine ever imposed in U.S. history, It's this vehicle, they're a truck manufacturing, they make the engines, their name is Cummins. And they have agreed to pay $1.67 billion, $75 billion for violating the Clean Air Act. What have they been doing, you may ask? Well, they have been installing, allegedly, though they have agreed to the fine, but allegedly, they're called defeat devices. And what they do is they bypass or override a vehicle's own emission controls. And they put 630,000 of these in Ram pickup trucks. The models were the 2013 to 2019, the Ram 2500s and 3500s. They put these defeat devices in them. And then so one of those big bad boys. And then between 2019 and 2023, they used auxiliary defeat devices in another 330,000 vehicles. What is the pollution effect of this? Well, it puts out thousands of tons of nitrous oxide emissions. And why are nitrous oxides bad? They're super bad for respiratory illness and for asthma. So we don't want them in the atmosphere. And it's really amazing. Like I said, this is the second biggest ever fine. It does have to be approved also by a court, but they have agreed in principle they're going to pay it. It'll be paid to the federal government and to the California state government.
So it's good news, bad news. The good news is they are being fined. They were caught. But the bad news is that they got away with it for a while.
They did it. Yes, the bad news is they did it for all that time. And, I mean, this is why we have to have the EPA, because we have these laws and all vehicle parts and vehicle engine manufacturers have to be in compliance with the emission standards that the Clean Air Act stipulates. In manufacturing the trucks and the cars and, all the vehicles they're going to put on the road. And those are laws for a reason, to protect us. And, well done EPA for, finding this out. And
again,
it went on for years,
Yeah, and again, I don't mean to always get back to politics, but it does, I think, underscore the importance of having some EPA presence and the teeth continuing to be the EPA, something that, of course, the GOP and GOP administrations want to remove, understanding quickly the GOP administration was in charge, Nixon was in charge when the EPA was formed, but since then it's been an effort to really undermine them completely and actually eliminate the EPA under Trump. So Bravo is then the first story. Moving on.
Okay, so then the second story, not so great. So this is about a pandemic that's happening with birds, and now we know, or we've known for a while, with mammals. So there's a very, very, very lethal avian flu, H5N1, and it's been around since 2020. It's killed millions of birds so far. And then we've just had the first confirmation of a polar bear that's been killed by it. And this is a big deal, obviously, because polar bears are already threatened. They're losing sea ice, and that absolutely has a huge impact on their ability to survive. And then the fact that this flu affects mammals. So the amazing thing about it, it's been around since 2020. It's on every continent except Australia. And this is the first that, one of these, sort of deep north species or, a polar bear has been found to have died from it. At first they thought it was something else. And then the more tests they did going in and looking at more and more of the bear's tissue. So what they think is that, either ate an ailing bird or a dead bird who had the flu. It's been found in skunks, in foxes, black bears, brown bears, sea lions. So far, it hasn't been too lethal in mammals, except the sea lions in South America. They apparently have been pretty decimated by the H5N1. And, this story reminds me of, a couple of things. But right now we've got this incredible permafrost melting happening above the Arctic Circle. And there's a park that's in Siberia. And, what they're monitoring right now is how much methane is coming out of the permafrost, because that's what permafrost covers, things that decompose without oxygen rather than letting off CO2 create methane. And the methane is held under the permafrost, the ice, until it melts, and then boom, out it comes. Yes, and you get sort of incredible subsidence like this. But one of the things scientists have said is, what if there are ancient viruses under that ice, and those are exposed as the permafrost melts? So, as per usual, it's like we really have to do something about our emissions.
That is a truly, apocalyptic scenario on top of an already slow-moving apocalyptic scenario. It's interesting that you've got the bird flu, which is raging. This most recent round in this country, I think, has been particularly virulent and tough. Over 70 million birds in the U.S., as you mentioned, and 11.4 million affected in 1 month. And then you see the involvement, as you've said, of this polar bear. Then you point to the permafrost melting and these ancient viruses being exposed, and the population of the world not in any way built from the standpoint of our immune system to handle that onslaught. And it's, the only thing you can do is slow down the degree of warming. That's all you can do. There's no way you can inoculate yourself against them. So we're really facing, again, it's an existential threat.
Yeah. And the ancient viruses, that's not a proven thing yet. That's just this could be, one of the results. Yes, no, we're really in uncharted territory, and it makes what happened at COP, 28 even harder to sort of, reconcile ourselves with. It's like, this is go time. But what I want to do today is
what other good news do you have for us? Happy New Year.
Yeah, we're going to do a sandwich. We went from the good,
that's good. I thought we were doing a new thing like, how are we all going to die? Let's spin the wheel. It'll be bird flu. No? Go ahead.
No. So on Tuesday night, a wind turbine whirred into life 15 miles off the coast of Martha's Vineyard in the state of Massachusetts. And it's going to be the biggest large-scale wind turbine development for the US. And it's really a big deal. So, right now it's one wind turbine. It will be 5 within the first couple of months of this year. And it will go to 62 when the project is completely finished. It will power 400,000 homes. This is enormous because, I'm sure I'm always saying this, when Biden came into office, we had 7 offshore wind turbines only. We are so late to this game. We're not even in the top, 11 countries. China is way ahead of us, the UK, Germany, the Netherlands. Their wind turbines are just, it's crazy. But the great thing is, this has happened. It will be 62. There's another project that's going to be off the New York coast, a Danish company called Ørsted. They're all over the world putting in these offshore wind turbines. And the Biden administration is very, very determined that, we really do this, and that by the year 2030, we're producing 30 gigatons, that's billion tons, gigawatts of electricity, and that would power 10 million homes. So,
wow.
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. The one thing I should say, though, is that even though, we've got these tax incentives with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and that there are all these incentives for companies, we have been having, and it was even announced this week, so Ørsted have had other projects that they are now not going to build. BP and a big company called Equinor, they've pulled back. They're all citing, costs, inflation. And then, one of the other things, this hasn't been cited by them, but of course there's this huge pushback against them. And a lot of it is funded by, guess who? The fossil fuel industry. You have residents saying we don't want you to, mess with our beautiful ocean view. But most of these developments are so far offshore, they're not going to do that. But we should just be, it just should be just wholesale adoption at this point.
Sure, there shouldn't even be a battle over this, and there continues to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think you speak to the gains we make and the proven track record of those gains, and still, yet it seems to be an uphill battle. So let's be, and I had, it's funny, I was visiting Central and South America over the holiday period, and there's a lot of conversation about, these alternative energy. In fact, a lot of people were talking about smaller nuclear reactors, something that we've talked about on the show from time to time, when we talk about nuclear energy coming online to supplement a lot of these other alternative energies. And increasingly, that's getting a look, and that's getting a lot of conversation in, even emerging economies. So I just think of that as we look at wind and we look at solar, et cetera. What else do you have?
As far as news goes?
Yes, whatever you want to get to.
Well, I tweeted this morning, and it's so disappointing. So our neighbor to the north, Canada, who's supposed to be the gentle green giant, they just are not. And so there's been this really extensive research into their forestation practices in their boreal forest. They have a lot of boreal forest, more than, what you've got in Northern Europe and in the US. And the boreal forest is super important because it holds more carbon, way more, or not twice as much, but way more carbon than all the tropical rainforests. So boreal forests are super important. And Canada have, been saying for years, we're really good stewards of our boreal forest. We're very careful with deforestation, blah, blah, blah. And if you look at my Twitter feed, you'll see the story. They are not. They've been lying, and they have been going in. And what they've done is they've clear-cut patches, and then they've left, sort of old 100 growth plus forest around it. But when you create too many of these bare patches in the middle, you create, they call them, you create these islands. And so species like caribou and other species that live in these forests, they have to be able to get from, one bit of boreal forest to another. Well, if you make the gap in between them too big, you really inhibit their ability to thrive. And unfortunately, that's what's happening. And it's tens of millions of hectares that they have allowed to be deforested. And it's such an important ecosystem, particularly for carbon sequestration. Like I'm saying, it's, I think it's over 720, I don't know, mega, giga, whatever, tons of carbon, as opposed to 325 when you look at tropical rainforests. So boreal is super important. And
the boreal is the cold climate forests, right? Isn't that essential?
So it's what happens around the Arctic Circle.
Right.
So that's why it's in, northern
Canada
Europe,
and Alaska and
Canada, yes, and Alaska, and Canada has the biggest lot, and where they've been doing this deforesting is in Ontario and Quebec, and they've sort of hidden it inside the forest. Gone and allowed them to clear cut. They allowed them to put in roads for the forestry vehicles.
This is for ranching and agriculture, or this is or this is for drilling?
This is for wood. I mean, they're going in there. I mean, look at it. It's just, and then to be lying, and Trudeau was lying and saying how, responsible they're being, and they realize how important it is as a resource.
Those sweet Canadians, as it turns out, they can whip out a lie just like the Americans can.
Yeah, they can. And it's all about money. And, it's just, time is running out. And these are such important ecosystems. I mean, I can't stress it enough. The carbon that's in there, we need it to stay in there. We don't need it in the atmosphere. And it's this thing that we talk about over and over again, Mark. It's these short-term gains that will have long-term disastrous consequences. I mean, I was reading a BBC wrap-up of 2023 the other day, and I mean, it was communities all over the world. And one community who live in Western Sydney, like a big, rich country like Australia. And it's these suburbs in Western Sydney that have been built very quickly to, house a growing population. Well, they've become urban heat islands. It's all asphalt and concrete. There aren't green spaces. It's too far from the coast to get the cooling effect of the coast. It's sort of in the foothills of the Blue Mountains. And these people are suffering from the heat in the Australian summers, which are getting super, super warm. So it's not just people who are living in, favelas and shanty towns who've got corrugated, tin above them as their roofs and are sort of basically living inside an oven, in developing countries who are suffering. It's people in developed countries who are living in the poor part of town. And it's, this is happening. And so for Canada to be saying, hey, we're protecting our boreal forests and they're not, is just bonkers. It's just...
Well, it's the cognitive dissonance associated with even those ads that, major oil companies run and petroleum companies run, even as they plunder the environment and they get, some sweet classical music or light piece and beautiful vistas. And, they'll say, we're here to protect the environment and also give you the power you need. It's got this, it's BS, right? But I mean, they're essentially, they're greenwashing in commercials across the board. And as you say, they make this announcement to Canadians, these pronouncements, and then look at what they're doing in their own backyard. And as you say, in Australia as well. And then you're talking about the communities within the community that bear the brunt of it. But, look, it's the world on fire, and Australia is a great example. I mean, it's all there. You need that carbon sequestration. My God, Australia is a great example of what's needed.
It's an absolute no-brainer. And then what happened in Canada this year with, these terrible fires that they had. I mean, they were, they were devastating. They lost millions of hectares of forest. And the fact that, that they're in there, cutting them down as well. I mean, it just, it sort of beggars belief. It, defies logic. My head is exploding quietly. We just have to stop with this, this idea that the world's resources are, just ours to plunder, ad nauseum, because we've already reached the moment when we know they're not, so now we have to, get on with it.
This quick question from Edward Lee, who gives us a $5 super chat, and a big shout out for that.
Big shout out.
Why are the viruses a concern when they need a living host, asks Edward. We were talking about the viruses to begin this segment, about the fact that the permafrost melt will release these viruses potentially. You said, look, this is just a theory.
That was pure speculation, because obviously with the H5N1, they are going from living host to living host. And what they would, describing with these ancient viruses under the permafrost, that is absolute speculation. So maybe I shouldn't have even mentioned it. But
it's being talked about. I mean, you're not the first person to mention it. I've read a lot about it. So it's definitely spoken of in the apocalypse domino. It's definitely one of them, so.
Well, I don't know if anyone watching or listening today, or if you've seen it, Mark, but did you see that British psychological thriller, the series Fortitude?
No.
Which was shot in a fictitious town called Fortitude in Norway. Well, this was mammoths that were thawing, that had a parasitic, host that had laid eggs in it. These were wasps, not a, virus. But I remember watching that, and that wasn't that long ago. And you watch those things and you think, oh, well, that's not going to, happen in our lifetimes. And unfortunately, at this point, we sort of don't know exactly what's going to happen in our lifetimes. And we do know a lot of it. A lot of it is predicted, and it's already on the table. But yes, I don't know about, I
for
do
sure, you can't say. It's a concern. Yeah. You can find Belinda. Follow her on Twitter X at Belinda Weymouth. You can see it there, WAYMOUTH. Thank you, Belinda. And I like the fact that you had some good news. You had some encouraging news. And then you did, of course, serve up the fact that, we don't have long to be occupying this magnificent planet.
Well, we do if we get smart and right-sized right away. Come on, Mark. I mean, we do.
We do. No, I know. I'm
political
teasing.
will. We need political will.
No,
in
we know the way, and it's a question of whether we take the way. All right. How about it for Belinda Weymouth, everybody? Thanks, Belinda.
My pleasure.
See you next week for It's the Planet Stupid.
More.
It's the planet stupid.
No. It's the planet stupid.
Next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
Oh, it's been a fun show with a lot of fun stuff. It started in a weird way with a long comment about somebody who doesn't like this, doesn't like to punch down. Lori, how about a big shout out, Albert, to
so
Lori.
nice.
Shout out.
Happy New Year. Be nice to Kim. Everyone else, you know. Oh,
Thanks for having
be
my
nice
back,
to
Lori.
Kim. Yeah.
Right on, sister.
And also wanted to recognize Winthrop for a 5 spot with a big shout out.
Big shout out.
Happy New Year. Remember, you become what you think about. Wow. That's true. It's true. Thank you, Winthrop.
I mean, to win the Super Bowl this year, Mark.
Commish, you think Ravens, Niners, the Super Bowl?
I hope, but I don't care who we play. Just Niners and Super Bowl, we're gonna win. So
Okay.
February 11th.
I'm going to say this, Commish, and don't get me wrong. I hope you won't take this the wrong way. But I think Winthrop was thinking bigger than just the Niners when he said, you become what you think about.
Albert, thank you.
I'm just saying, Commish, that I believe
Manifest the win.
Yeah, it seemed deeper philosophically than just the Niners getting to the Super Bowl. But it's nice to have goals, and that's clearly one of yours. Deborah B., big shout out.
Big shout out.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And we mentioned Hula, mentioned again Hula, love you,
shout out.
Hula, and everybody who supports us with super chats and super stickers. You can do that in the replay as well. And what else did I have, Albert? I turn to you. There's no chance to abuse Albert before the show ends?
No.
I did tweet today, Mark, without you requesting. So
you did what?
There, I did tweet today. Yeah.
Oh, you did tweet. That's
Look at
right.
that.
I didn't retweet you, so it's my shame. Wow. Tomorrow, Albert curates Friday Fabulous Florida, the segment that PT thinks is too fluffy. PT may want to go watch a different show tomorrow.
30 minutes segment.
By the way, if you're joining us late, PT was like the opened up a blowtorch of criticism on me. But I'm looking forward to tomorrow, where Kim will be working for twice the California minimum wage.
I'll take it.
Because take it. Absolutely.
Oh.
I'll hold you to that. The After Party Live is next.
I'm Shutdown Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Michael Shore, Politics tomorrow. Snyder on film. And Friday Fabulous Florida. Till then, bye-bye.